الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The two major tribes in Madinatul Munawwara were the Aus and the Khazraj tribes. Although the majority of them they lived and resided in Madinatul Munawwara, लेकिन उनमें से कुछ लोग ऐसे थे कि जज़ीरा अरब के दूसरे ममालिक में दूसरे एरियाज़ में वो वहाँ रहते थे. For example, some of them they settled just south of Sham, Syria, and they gained control of this area and they formed a kingdom. This area would become known as Ghassan. And they would have a very important role in the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. क्योंकि जब सुलह हुदैबिया हुई तो Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ने खतूत भेजे, letters to the kings. And one of the letters went to the king of Ghassan. In fact, is mentioned in other books of seerah कि जब रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने एक सहाबी रसूल को भेजा तो वो जा रहा था एक ख़त लेके, and he was stopped by one of the governors in this area and he was actually killed in the process. When this king he received the letter of Rasulullah सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, तो उस वक्त वो बहुत उसको बहुत गुस्सा हुआ. How can somebody say to me that I need to accept one Allah, and if I accept his message then my kingdom will remain? कि अगर मैंने उनकी जो मैसेज है अगर मैंने कबूल की तो मैं बादशाह रहूँगा, वरना अल्लाह सुब्हानहु व तआला मेरी जो बादशाहत है उसको हलाक कर देगा. So he prepared to fight against the Muslims, and for this reason the battle of Mu'tah, because the Ghassanis they changed religion, they became Christian and they allied with the Roman Byzantine Empire. So they had a very big army at their disposal. And in the battle of Mu'tah, the 3,000 or so companions they faced against some 200,000 Romans. Later this would also result in the battle of Tabuk, the battle of Yarmouk, all of these various battles, because of initially this was the thing which kind of started it all. The situation was so severe that one day during the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, रात के वक्त जब किसी ने सैयदना उमर रदियल्लाहु ta'ala an के दरवाजे पे, when he knocked on the door in the middle of the night, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an opened the door and said, "Why are you knocking in the middle of the night? Have the Ghassanis attacked?" This is how anxious the Muslims were in regards to this situation. Now what happens? The process, the years pass on, and now the situation is that Sayyiduna Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he has dispatched numerous armies, and slowly they are taking the land from the Byzantine Empire. And likewise, in the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and they reach such a point where this king of Ghassan, who is a sworn enemy to the Muslims, he writes a letter to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, और ख़त में कहता है कि मैं इस्लाम कबूल करने के लिए तैयार हूँ. I'm ready to accept Islam. I'm ready to pledge allegiance to you. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala says, this is brilliant. So they come with their soldiers, he's surrounded by his men. As they stop outside of Madinatul Munawwara, they wear their silk garments, they place silk cloths on their horses, and like with pomp and pride, they enter into Madinatul Munawwara. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he welcomes them. These individuals, they accept Islam. और ज़ुल्हिज्जा का महीना है या ज़ुल्क़ादा का, यानी हज के महीने में है. तो सैयदना उमर रदियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु फरमाते हैं कि मैं हज के लिए जा रहा हूँ. And these individuals, including the king of Ghassan, he says, I will come with you. मैं भी साथ में आता हूँ ताकि मैं भी हज करूँ. अब वो हज के लिए गए हैं, तवाफ़ काबा कर रहे हैं. They doing circumambulation of the Kaaba. And this king, unka jo izar hai, the lower garment, is dragging on the floor. And in those times, people who would have a lot of wealth, they would wear long garments as a sign of pride. So maybe for this reason, or maybe for another reason, regardless of the situation, his izar is dragging on the ground. Who is this? The king of Ghassan. And in the process, one individual, by mistake, he stands on the trail of the izar, and the izar is undone. This lower garment is undone. The person, he becomes extremely embarrassed. वो गुस्सा में आ जाता है. He turns around, he strikes the individual with such force, he breaks his nose. यानी नाक को तोड़ देता है. अब ये जो बंदा है वो सैयदना उमर रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु के पास आता है और कहता है कि मैं चाहता हूँ किसास, कि उसने जो मेरे खिलाफ किया है, ना इंसाफ़ी की है, उसने जुल्म किया है, I want recompense, he has wronged me. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he brings the king of Ghassan. He says, in Islam, the only way you can resolve this matter is if this person forgives you. तो अब कोई बात ऐसी करे कि वो आपको मुआफ़ कर दे, वरना जो legal process है उसकी तरफ हमको जाना पड़ेगा. And in the legal process, if you are found guilty of hurting someone, then you will be given qisas, retribution, in accordance as the way you hurt this person. बादशाह बहुत हैरान है, इसे बड़ा हैरान है. He says, how can this be the case? I am a king, this is just an average person, and he's nothing in front of me, and yet you're treating him in the same way that you would treat me. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he says, this is the justice of Islam. तो वो बादशाह कहता है कि give me some time, let me think over it, and I will give you an answer. और शाम को रात के वक्त he flees from Makkah al-Mukarramah and he returns back to his empire and he apostates on Islam. Later, all of these areas, they would come under the control of Muslims anyways. But the interesting thing is this, look at the justice of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. That this is a man whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him so much power, so much wealth, so much money, so much prestige, that when he came to Madinatul Munawwarah, he was wearing one specific piece of jewelry, which was one of the earrings of his great-grandmother, which was so expensive that the entire kingdom would have pride on this one piece of jewelry. They would show off the fact that their kingdom had this one piece of jewelry. But when it came to justice, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, ye nahi dekha ki ye kaun hai, badshah hai, uski ke paas kitne paise hai, this, that, the other. No. He said, this is what Islam says and this is exactly what will happen. This was the justice of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And where did he learn this from? He learned this from none other than the likes of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. When Sayyidina Abu Bakr became Khalifa, we mentioned about the wage he was given. When Sayyidina Umar became the Khalifa, something similar happened. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and it was very difficult for him to function without anything given to him. तो लोगों से पूछा कि मेरे लिए क्या हक है, what can I take? So people gave different opinions. Eventually Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an का जो नज़रिया था, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an ने उसको पसंद किया. कहा कि आपके लिए खाने का इंतज़ाम किया जाएगा 2 वक्त का, 2 meals a day. Morning and evening you will be given. 1 pair of clothing for the summer, 1 pair of clothing for the winter. गर्मी के मौसम में एक जोड़ा और ठंडी के मौसम के लिए एक जोड़ा. And then 1 animal which you can go to do Hajj upon. And other than this, whatever the other Muslims they get, you will get the same amount. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he was really happy with this. Eventually, when they saw that Sayyidina Umar was struggling, उन्होंने सोचा कि हम यानी उसमें कुछ इजाफा करें ताकि आपके लिए आसानी हो. लेकिन जैसे ही उन्होंने ये बात कही सैयदना उमर रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु से, तो वो बहुत गुस्से में आ गए, गज़ब में आ गए. Said, if I find out the people who have chosen to try and increase my salary, I will punish them as a result of this. Yani look at the justice he's showing in regards to his own self. One of the amazing things about the Khilafah was, if somebody did wrong to you, no matter who he was, you could bring him in front of a judge. काजी के सामने आप उस बंदे को ला सकते थे. यहाँ तक कि अगर खलीफा खुद ने कुछ किया होता, जैसे कि एक वक्त ऐसा हुआ कि सैयदना उमर रदियल्लाहु ta'ala anhu, he wanted to buy a horse. So he took it for trialing, testing before you buy something. तो जब वो ले गई, सैयदना उमर रदियल्लाहु ta'ala anhu, by the way, he was very tall. When he would sit on a horse, his legs would reach the ground. This is why they would say he was the one of two lions. Because when he would ride the horse, two lions would come behind him. I have seen the slippers of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. Bihamdihi ta'ala. I have seen not only the slippers of Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, and Sayyidina Uthman, and the slipper of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When you look at the slipper of Sayyidina Umar, you can actually see the back bit is rubbed out. And they say this is what it was, that when he would ride on the horse, his legs would drag on the ground because he was so tall. Others say, they say he was the one of two lions because he used to cry so much out of the fear of Allah that two lions, they formed on his face. He used to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Bilal says that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala is the best of people. Lekin jab wo ghazab mein aa jate, then it would become very difficult. To kaha ki aap kya karte hain phir? What would you do when he would become angry? Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala and says that we would begin to recite from Quran-e-Kareem. Jaise hi humne Quran ki tilawat ki, then his anger would come down. So regardless, Sayyidina Umar, he's riding this horse, and maybe because he's so big or whatever, during the riding of this horse, whilst he is trialing it, the leg of the horse, it breaks. वो टूट जाता है. वो वापस ले जाता है, कहता है कि ऐसा ऐसा हुआ, कहा कि मैं किसास चाहता हूँ, I want judgment. I want this to be ruled. He says, okay, who do you want the judge to be? So he mentions the name Shurayh. He's a person, a faqih from Iraq, all the way from Iraq. He says, this is the only person whom I believe who is genuinely fair. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala sends him a letter. The person comes, he listens to the entire story, and what does he do? He judges in favor of this man, that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and he must give recompense. अगर हम होते और किसी ने हमारे खिलाफ फैसला किया होता, तो हम क्या करते? We would make sure that this person would never see the light of day again. Or if we didn't do that, at the very minimum, we would make sure he would never get a position of authority. But what did Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he becomes so happy because of the justice of this person, he appoints him as a qazi. And this is that individual in regards to whom you will read about Qazi Shurayh. He becomes a famous judge because of his fairness and because of his justice. So any person, if they did anything wrong at any time, immediately they could bring that person in front of a judge. And it wasn't just the Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and even the people underneath him. One day Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala वो मिंबर पर खड़े हुए, और अरब के लोग ऐसा किया करते थे कि जब खुतबा शुरू करते, then what would they say? They would say, listen and obey. कि जो मैं कह रहा हूँ वो सुनो और उसके मुताबिक अमल करें. So as soon as he said this, listen and obey, Sayyidina Salman al-Farsi वो बैठे हुए थे, and he says that we will not listen, we will not obey. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he became perplexed. Why would you say something like this? So Sayyidina Salman Farsi ने कहा कि जो माल गनीमत हमको हासिल हुआ, जो जिज़िया हमको हासिल हुआ, उनमें से हर बंदे को कपड़े का एक जो है जुज़ मिला. Every person was given a specific piece of cloth from this material. But I can see that you have two of those cloths. You don't have one of them, you have two of them. And this is not justice. At that point, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he did ishara to his son, Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar. He says, stand up and explain what has happened. So look at this. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar, he stands up and he says, when we were distributing the pieces of clothing, we gave everyone the same amount, even the Khalifa of the Muslims, we gave him the same as everybody else got. But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, unki jo qad tha, his height, it was so tall that this cloth did not fit him. तो मैंने कहा that, oh my honorable father, you have been wearing that clothing that you have for so long, it's become completely worn out. आप ऐसा करें, take my cloth that I was given and join it together, and from that make a new pair of clothing. So my father, he refused. उन्होंने इनकार किया, कहा कि अगर लोग देखेंगे तो वो कहेंगे that look, the Khalifa got 2 pieces of cloth and I only got 1 piece of cloth. तो उस वक्त सैयदना अब्दुल्ला ने कहा कि अगर ऐसा हुआ तो मैं अल्लाह सुब्हानहु व तआला, I will take an oath upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I will inform the people what has happened. When Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar, he mentioned this entire story, Sayyidina Salman al-Farisi, he heard this, he said, "Oh Khalifatul Muslimin, now we will listen and now we will obey." And keeping the leader in check. And maybe Sayyidina Salman al-Farisi already knew this, but he wanted to make sure that everybody else knows this. Because once Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala ने पूछा कि ऐ सलमान बताए कि मैं ये कैसे मालूम करूँ कि मैं बादशाह हूँ या खलीफा हूँ? How do I know that I am a king or I am the Khalifa of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? और उन्होंने जो बात कही, honestly, it's so important to listen to those people who are in positions of leadership. He said, if you take 1 dirham of the Muslims without right, which you have no right to, you take 1 dirham, then you are a king and you will be judged like a king on the day of judgment. But if you take nothing of the Muslims which does not belong to you, then you are a true Khalifa of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then you are the representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and by the way, it wasn't just him, his own family. You know, he said about his family, and this is very important actually. If you think about what happens in our times, when people are in positions of leadership, then their children and their family, they get free reign. वो जो करना चाहते हैं वो करते हैं और उनको कुछ भी नहीं होता है. They use their influence, their power to get their children and their family out of trouble. What happened was one of his children, Abu Shahma, they say his actual name was Abdul Rahman. There's a thing called nabidh. It's like a drink, which is not alcohol, but it's fermented. And it is permissible to drink if it's not alcohol. Lekin agar usko rehne diya, then slowly it turns into alcohol. So if you drink it first at the beginning when it's not alcohol, it's fine. But if it ferments and turns into alcohol, then you're in trouble. तो उसने पी लिया, उसको मालूम नहीं था कि ये जो है ये शराब बन चुका है. He was in Egypt, और वहाँ का जो खलीफा, जो वजीर था, वो था सैयदना अमर इब्न अल-आस. जब उसको मालूम हुआ तो अब हद देनी है for drinking alcohol, तो वो क्या करता है? He takes him into private quarters. And he doesn't even lash him. You know, drinking alcohol, the punishment is 80 lashes. So he just like gives him the lashes, just gets it done and dusted. You know, we've done it, it's sorted, off you go, carry on. लेकिन जैसे ही सैयदना उमर रदियल्लाहु ta'ala को मालूम हुआ कि मेरे बेटे ने ऐसा किया है, he immediately sent for him from Egypt. He brought him to Madinatul Munawwara. Then himself he took the whip and he had him lashed in public, and he said that you are no different to the remainder of the Muslims. If you commit a crime, I will punish you the same. Rather, he would say to his family that if any of you make a mistake, then you will be punished twice. The first punishment for being a Muslim, and the second punishment because you are from the family of the Khalifa of the believers, the Amirul Mu'mineen. This is how strict and how stern he was upon his own family. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. You know, when the leader, the people who are in charge, when they lead by example, they go above and they go beyond, then the people who are underneath, they are inspired as well. But when the people who are in positions of power, they are corrupt, then the people underneath, they will just follow suit. They will just walk behind them. If this person takes 1 dirham, they will take 10 dirhams. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he led by example. Sayyidina Amr bin As, I just mentioned about him. He was the governor of Egypt. Rasulullah had so much love for him. But his son, he used to have horse races. And one day he was racing a slave who was Copt, any Christian, Kipti. And this person, he was able to beat the son of Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As in the race. तो वो गुस्सा में आ गया. He took a whip and he whipped him on the head. And he says, do you know who I am? He says, I'm the son of the governor, and you're just a slave, and not even just any slave, you're a Copt. How dare you try and embarrass me in front of the people? When this Christian, he heard this, this slave, Christian slave, he heard this, he knew that Sayyidina Umar was very just. He went from Egypt to Medina to Munawwarah, he made a complaint. Now, what would Sayyidina Umar do? Send a letter, make sure it doesn't happen again. You got a warning. Yes? Place your son in detention or something like this, right? No, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he sends a letter. He says, you and your son from Egypt to Medina to Munawwarah right now. Leave what you're doing. Place somebody in charge, not just your son, you as well, both of you to Medina to Munawwarah right now. Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As, he presents himself. The entire case is presented in front of Sayyidina Umar. It's proven that he has done this. Usne aisa hi kiya hai, usne zulm kiya hai. He says, take this whip. And the way he hit you, you hit him now. The way he hit you, you will hit him exactly the same. And then after you have done this, take the whip and put it on the head of Amr ibn al-As. Because it was because of his position that his son thought that he could do whatever he wants. See, look at this, the way he treats the governors as well. And the reason why he's able to treat the governors with such firmness is because he himself was so firm upon the Quran and Sunnah. यानी जब हम खुद कोई अमल नहीं करते हैं तो we don't have a leg to stand on. And so his governors were very careful to not step out of line. You know the 4 rules he had, I mentioned, you're not allowed to ride Turkish horses, you're not allowed to eat delicacies, you're not allowed to post cards at your doors, you're not allowed to dress in fancy clothes. One of his governors, they were wearing silk clothing, and he had guards at his door. When it was proven that he was doing this, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he called him to Medina to Munawwarah and said, you have been relieved of your duties. He wrapped him in a cloth and he says, can you see this flock of sheep? From now on, your job is to take care of this flock of sheep. Meaning within 1 minute, he demoted him from governor to shepherd. He says, this is what you can do. This is what you are worthy of. You're not worthy of being a governor. And so like this, there's so many narrations which are mentioned about the justice, the trustworthiness of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and how he showed the Muslims how to lead. And he led by example. It wasn't one rule for me and another rule for thee. I will act in one way because I am from a particular family or because I have a particular position, and for you is something else. No, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he showed the Muslims how to behave, how to act. And then the maqam, because he was so strict on the Quran and Sunnah, the maqam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. There was a place called Nahawand in Iraq. To get to this place from Medina to Munawwarah, it would take you over 1 month walking. Chalte hue, agar aapko yahan jana hota, it's in Azerbaijan, it's a mountainous region. It would take you 1 month walking. One day, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he stood upon the mimbar. And all of a sudden, he turns around completely. And he starts saying, Ya Saritul Jabal, Ya Saritul Jabal. O Sariya the mountain, O Sariya the mountain, O Sariya the mountain. And people, they're just like completely confused. They just don't understand. They think, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, ma'azallah, maybe, he's lost his intellect or something like this. What's he doing? And as soon as he said that, all of a sudden he turns around and he carries on doing what he's doing. He carries on with the khutbah. After Sayyidina Ali approaches him and he says, what have you done today? Oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, like, are you trying to embarrass us? What is this? Sometime later, the people, they remembered this because of how strange it was. A letter comes into Madinatul Munawwarah. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he had sent a particular individual whose name was Sariya to fight against the Persians. And in the letter he writes that on this particular day, we were facing these Persians and we were going to imminently be defeated. And all of a sudden we heard a voice which sounded exactly like Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, who was telling us to turn towards the mountain. And so we did exactly as he instructed, and bihamdihi ta'ala, upon his instruction, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gave us victory. Where is Sayyidina Umar? Where is Nahawand? Where is Sayyidina Umar? Where is his leader of this army, Sariya? But look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives him authority that in such a short period of time, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, he's able to instruct this individual. And the distance becomes short for him because he was subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made the entire creation subservient to him. Space and time, these are creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you are subservient to the Creator, Allah can make the creation subservient to you. And inshaAllah ta'ala, we finish with these last one or 2 points. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and we hear about his strictness, but he himself was very lenient, especially upon the Muslims. He was very soft towards the Muslims. And he would make this dua, like we mentioned, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make him soft towards the Muslims. And so one day, one of his governors, they entered upon him as he was with his family, his children. And what he saw was very strange. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, he was lying down on the ground. Zameen par lete hue the, aur unke jo bacche the, they were playing on top of him. And not only were they playing on top of him, they were like pulling his beard and pulling his hair and stuff like this. And the governor, he was shocked. He says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, like, what is this? You're the leader of the believers, and what is this situation? The leader shouldn't be like this. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala ne पूछा कि आपकी जो फैमिली है उनके साथ आप कैसे होते हैं? How are you with your family? तो वो बंदा ने कहा कि जब मैं घर में दाखिल होता हूँ तो सब लोग खामोश हो जाते हैं. They all shut up, they all be quiet, they all attentive, and they don't dare speak in front of me. When he mentioned this, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, what did he do? He removed him from his post. He says, you're not worthy of being a governor. कि वो बंदा जो उनकी फैमिली है उन पर रहम नहीं कर सकता है तो वो उम्मत मुहम्मदी पर कैसे रहम करेगा? If he can't have mercy upon his family, how will this person have mercy on the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He removed him from his post. And he was teaching that there needs to be a balance. You need to be strict so that people don't take advantage, and you can't be too lenient so that people, they don't cross the limits as well. You have to work within a parameter, within a circle. And so the entire life of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and this is exactly what we see him doing, teaching this example. And this is why when Rasulullah saw the dream, that he was pulling water out of the well, and then he gave the bucket to Sayyidina Abu Bakr, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he pulled the water, and they say there was some weakness, because his khilafah was only 2 years and he had to deal with all of them problems. And then the bucket is given to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and the bucket, it grows in size. It becomes massive. And he pulls so much water out that everyone is satiated, up to the extent that even the animals, they get to drink water from this well, from this bucket. And they said, what is the interpretation, what is the meaning of this, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? And the meaning which was given and explained was the benefit, the financial and the worldly benefit which will be given to all of the various Muslims. The way that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, during his khilafah, all of these various territories, they would come under his control. And how Islam would spread far and wide. But all of this stems back to what? His justice. The fact that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, he was unwavering in regards to the Sharia. And no one should think for even a second that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, his khilafah was a utopia. It was Jannah upon earth. There is no Jannah upon earth. There were many difficulties that the people had to face even in the khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. In fact, in the khilafah of Sayyidina Umar, they had the plague, and they also had a severe drought, Amur Ramada, which they call the year of destruction. In that year, there was such a lack of rain, they say the plants, they turned into ash. This happened during the khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. They had to go through this hardship. But in that time, even then, Sayyidina Umar showed how to lead. He made, ghee, clarified butter, he made it haram upon himself. He would not eat meat. He said, I will not eat that which the Muslims cannot eat. When he would be sat amongst the people, they would hear his stomach rumbling. The Khalifa, the Amir of the believers, they would hear his stomach rumbling. And he would take his finger and he would tap on his stomach and he would say, you will have nothing. You will not be satiated. you will not be full until the Muslims have something to eat. When the Muslims have something to eat, then you will get something to eat as well. He used to survive on olive oil. And because of him just eating olive oil, his entire complexion, it changed. His color changed. And then it's mentioned that one day, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, a point of Aqidah for you as well, he came out with the cloak of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the chadar of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And with him he called Sayyidina Abbas radiallahu, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And they made dua and he said, Ya Rasulullah, we used to take the wasila of your beloved. And just to show the importance and the permissibility of wasila, he says, today Ya Allah, we take the wasila of the uncle of your beloved Rasul, yani Sayyidina Abbas radiallahu ta'ala, and they say no sooner had he finished making dua that it rained and it rained and it rained, showing yani the dua of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and the permissibility of seeking blessings from the tabarukat and the permissibility of seeking wasila with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yani he took the wasila of Sayyidina Abbas radiallahu ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he accepted his dua. Insha'Allah ta'ala, tomorrow we will close our discussion on Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through his infinite mercy, forgive us our major and minor sins. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with the ability to follow in the footsteps of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Uthman, and Sayyidina Ali. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us true love of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, raise us with him on the day of judgment, and give us a place in Jannah alongside him. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.